The most dangerous person in a room isn't the one holding absolute power, nor the one skilled in manipulation. It is the silent one who sees through the masks worn by everyone else. Carl Jung uncovered a truth that still unsettles modern psychology. True awakening is nothing like the tranquil images painted by social media. It is not a blissful light. It is a psychological earthquake that incinerates every layer of fabrication. Drawing from Jung's lifetime of research, there are 9 distinctive signs, a kind of map for those who have dared to step outside the shared dream of the crowd. But why did Jung consider these people the most dangerous? Because anyone who truly possesses all 9 signs becomes an enemy of the old order, a person too awake to be governed. Have you ever felt like you're quietly going mad in a world that calls itself normal? Or found yourself utterly exhausted down to the bone from playing the part of the happy person day after day? If those feelings are alive in you, then this video is your personal diagnosis. Here, we won't trade empty reassurances or hand out spiritual painkillers. Instead, we will dive straight into Jung's 9-sign protocol right here, right now. Sign 1. The disintegration of the persona. Let's consider a typical composite profile, one Jung often described in his studies on midlife crisis, to illustrate the beginning of awakening. The story starts with a man seeking therapy. Outwardly, he is the embodiment of a stability, a successful career, a harmonious family, and by every social standard, he's a model citizen, perfectly attuned to the rhythms around him. Yet, in the very first session, something unusual surfaces. This patient no longer cares what the therapist thinks of him. That attitude doesn't come from arrogance, nor is it an act of rebellion or anger. It's simply a state of being that exists beyond the need for approval or judgment. He sits there, courteous, but psychologically exposed. This is the very first sign in Jung's framework, the complete disintegration of the persona. In Jungian psychology, the persona, Latin for the actor's mask, is the public face we show to the world. It's the role of the diligent employee who always nods in meetings, the model father who never lets himself appear weak, or the entertaining friend who always knows how to liven up a party. The persona is not inherently bad. It's a necessary tool, a protective shell that helps the ego navigate complex relationships without being wounded. The problem for most people, those Jung called the sleeping, is that they've come to believe the mask is their real face. But for someone going through a true awakening, a seismic psychological event begins. That mask starts to come off. This change doesn't turn you into a social eccentric or make you unable to communicate. On the contrary, you can still shake hands, still smile, and still get your work done smoothly. But the critical shift happens inside. The identification has dissolved. In his writings, Jung describes this state with a haunting image. You experience social interactions as if you're watching a play you've memorized by heart, but no longer find interesting. Like a seasoned actor stepping onto the stage, your mastery of performance keeps the audience fooled. But deep down, you feel no connection to the role anymore. When the persona disintegrates, the psychic energy once consumed by maintaining the illusion of "I am a good person, I am a successful person," is released. But the price of this liberation is the extreme discomfort it creates for those around you. Why do society, colleagues, and even loved ones begin to feel uneasy, even angry, when you enter this state? Because ordinary social relationships are built upon an unconscious, unspoken contract. I will believe in your performance if you believe in mine. Together, we maintain a collective play to conceal existential emptiness. When one person stops acting, that contract is broken. The awakened individual, having shed the persona, inadvertently becomes a ruthless, polished mirror. Your silence, your penetrating gaze, or simply your lack of enthusiasm for joining status games, all reflect the other person's falseness back to them. They look at you and see their own nakedness. They feel judged, even though you have not spoken a word. The presence of someone who no longer wears a mask creates a field of pressure that forces others to confront the truth. They are still straining to perform. Being distanced, or quietly labeled as arrogant, becomes the inevitable price of reclaiming the real face beneath a mask worn for too long. You are no longer capable of deceiving yourself, and therefore you also lose the ability to soothe the deceptions of others. And when the persona has disintegrated, what remains is the exposed emptiness of the ego. We do not step immediately into the light. On the contrary, we are pushed into an abyss that most people spend their entire lives trying to fill or flee from. This is the second threshold, where innocence dies and true maturity begins. Sign 2. Total acceptance of the shadow. Jung once wrote in Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door, whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well. But one must learn to know oneself in order to know who one is." Pause for a moment and feel the weight of the words, painful constriction. Why is facing ourselves so painful? In depth psychology, the shadow is made up of all the aspects that are repressed, hidden, or unacknowledged within a person's unconscious. Over time, it becomes a vast reservoir for all repressed desires, wild anger, ruthless selfishness, and the latent evil that civilization tries so hard to cover up. But the awakened person breaks this rule because, as Jung once affirmed, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. They possess a psychological capacity called radical self-knowledge. Instead of watching the crimes on the news, murderers, swindlers, tyrants, and recoiling in horror, saying, "How could he do that? I would never be like that." The awakened person sees their own reflection. They look into that abyss and admit a shocking truth. In certain circumstances, with similar wounds and pressures, I am fully capable of those same cruel acts. That monster also lives within me. This is the moment of deepest humility and cold clarity. They realize the line between a model citizen and a criminal is far thinner than we imagine. The only real difference is the presence of conscious choice. The unawakened think themselves good because they are harmless, never doing evil. The awakened know they have claws, know they have venom, but they choose not to use them. That is true morality. The morality of the awakened is not the naivete of weakness, but the strength of a beast tamed by will. When someone reaches this state of total acceptance, a strange transformation occurs in the way they relate to the world, the disappearance of the need for moral superiority. You will rarely see an awakened person joining in collective stoning on social media or taking part in harsh judgment at the workplace. Why would they need to? When you have made peace with the demon inside yourself, you no longer need to project it onto others to feel more saintly. They see the mistakes, schemes, and stumblings of others through eyes of understanding, not condemnation. Their silence in the face of others' errors is often mistaken for indifference, but in truth, it is the gaze of a doctor observing a wound, not that of a judge delivering a sentence. And this is where the dangerous power of the second sign is revealed: immunity to manipulation. In human society, some of the strongest tools of control are shame and guilt. We fear our dark secrets being exposed, fear being labeled as bad, fear having our hidden desires seen. Manipulators, power systems, even toxic family members often use this fear to control our actions. But how can you threaten, blackmail, or manipulate someone who has already laid all of that bare in the light of their own conscience? No one can use false morality to instruct them because they have seen through the very nature of good and evil. No one can shame them because they have accepted the imperfection of being human. Their calmness in the face of personal attacks is not the result of suppression, but the composure of someone who knows exactly who they are. It is this absence of fear that makes them unpredictable to others. Someone unafraid of their own darkness will not fear the darkness of anyone else. They can sit face to face with the harshest truths of life without blinking, while others must turn away or try to sugarcoat reality. Acceptance of the shadow turns them into truth-tellers in a world addicted to sweet lies. When a person has bravely accepted the darkest parts of themselves, an inevitable consequence follows. They step into the third sign, a stage often deeply misunderstood, but one that is decisive for true rebirth. Sign 3. The necessary withdrawal. In a culture that values extroversion, energy, and constant connection, like American society, the sudden withdrawal of an individual is often seen as a failure, a sign of poor social skills, or worse, a pathology. Yet through the lens of Carl Jung, this phenomenon is not an illness at all, but a mandatory psychobiological stage. He called it the mechanism of conservation of libido. Imagine your mind as a river. In the past, your stream of energy, libido, flowed outward, into relationships, into climbing the career ladder, into weekend parties or shopping sprees. But when the awakening process begins, that river suddenly changes course. It flows inward. The water doesn't disappear. It simply withdraws from the barren banks of the material world to nourish a new seed of life forming in the depths of your psyche. The most obvious sign of this stage is a radical shift in how you respond to the world's noise. Noise here isn't just physical sound. It's the noise of shallow desires, of the social theater that everyone eagerly participates in. Maybe you used to be the life of the party, the one never missing a happy hour after work. But now, just 30 minutes in that noisy crowd is enough to drain your energy like a dead battery. Your nervous system becomes hypersensitive to pretense and to low-frequency vibrations. This sensation forces the awakened to make a drastic choice, to choose solitude over superficial connection. There is a crucial difference between loneliness and solitude that we need to distinguish. Loneliness is the pain of being separated, the feeling of lack when you crave connection but are left unmet. Solitude, on the other hand, is the glory of completeness. It's a state where one feels their own presence is enough. The awakened choose solitude because they would rather be alone in raw truth than dissolve into the crowd in comfortable deceit. Stillness becomes their nourishment, their laboratory where they reconstruct their entire value system. In addition, we must remain extremely alert and cautious at this point. The line between spiritual withdrawal and clinical depression can sometimes be very thin, but in essence, they are entirely opposite. Depression is the collapse of the will to live. It comes with feelings of hopelessness, dead ends, self-destruction, and a complete loss of interest in everything, both inner and outer worlds. The depressed person is trapped in a black hole and cannot see a way out. If you find yourself paralyzed, suffering from endless insomnia, and wanting to harm yourself, these are not signs of awakening. They are moments when you need immediate intervention from medical professionals and psychological experts. In contrast, the withdrawal of the awakened is like the journey of a caterpillar spinning its own cocoon. Within that quiet shell, the flame of life still burns, steady and intense. The awakened withdraw, not to escape life, but to prepare for a return, a rebirth in a more complete form. After passing through the necessary withdrawal to recharge and protect the seed of consciousness, the awakened begin to look back at the outside world. But this time, their eyes have changed. They no longer see life through the lens of old wounds or imposed expectations. The veil of illusion drops away, leading us to one of the harshest, yet most glorious milestones on this path. Sign 4. The loss of projection. Carl Jung once left us with a famous saying that exposes the nature of humanity. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. And the most common absurdity we practice every day is projection. According to psychoanalytic theory, projection is an unconscious defense mechanism in which people throw the traits, emotions, or drives they can't accept in themselves onto others. To illustrate this mechanism, let me tell you a story about a friend of mine, a classic victim of a family tragedy that, perhaps, many have experienced. His father was obsessed with perfection. He wanted his son to be a sports star and demanded that he get into the Ivy League. I still vividly remember the day my friend called me, his voice trembling, completely crushed, just because he missed out on making the main team and his grades slipped slightly from exhaustion. His father exploded in terrifying rage. He screamed the harshest words into his son's face. "You're lazy. You're too weak. You're a failure." In that moment, with ordinary eyes, we'd see a father disciplining his child. But through Jung's lens, a more painful truth was playing out. That father was seeing himself. The truth is, this father had a youth full of regret and fear. He had never dared to pursue his own dreams. Deep inside, he always felt mediocre and inadequate. But instead of accepting that pain, he projected it onto his little boy. When he screamed, "You're a failure," in reality, he was shouting at the image of his own past failures. My friend, in a cruel twist, had become the trash bin for the burden of his father's unlived life. But for the truly awakened, this tragic cycle comes to a complete end. This is perhaps the hardest sign to swallow in the whole protocol, because it strips away the sweet power of blaming others. The awakened go through a painful yet thorough shift. They reclaim every projection. They stop playing the victim of their parents, their boss, or society. When something unpleasant happens, say someone insults them, their first response is not to strike back, but to ask themselves, with chilling self-honesty, what pain within me is being triggered right now? If they feel anger towards someone else's arrogance, they immediately ask which part of their own arrogance is being awakened. They understand that others are only triggers. The emotional bomb belongs to them, and they alone own and are responsible for it. When you become a psychological fortress, you achieve a stunning inner freedom. Yet this freedom comes with a harsh side effect from the outside world. This is when we encounter the most brutal defense mechanism of society. Sign 5. The label of insanity. Look at the death spiral or antmill of army ants. Millions of ants blindly follow the scent of the one in front of them until they collapse from exhaustion and die. In that whirlpool, the only one who survives is the ant brave enough to break away from the circle. Human society operates in exactly the same way. The collective unconscious is the scent trail, and you, the awakened one, are seen as the system's error for daring to step outside the circle. In Jungian psychology, society isn't just a collection of individuals. It is governed by the collective unconscious. This system functions much like the immune system of a living body. Its purpose is to protect the stability of the group by eliminating or attacking any cell that acts differently. And the most effective weapon it uses to neutralize the awakened is pathologizing. Simply put, if the crowd cannot understand your motives, they will conclude that you are insane. Look at contemporary American society, where the American dream is built on materialism, relentless advancement, and the pursuit of fame. For the vast majority, this is the only measure of a successful life. But the awakened see just how empty these goals really are. They might refuse a lucrative promotion if it costs their inner peace. They might sell the big house to live more simply. They stop idolizing billionaires or celebrities. These actions, in the eyes of those who are asleep, are impossible to comprehend. They must find a reason to rationalize it. And the easiest conclusion is, that person must have something wrong with their head. He's gone mad. Or, more gently, that's just an oddball loser. When you're the only sane person in a collective madhouse, you're the one seen as crazy. Being given this label is actually a backhanded compliment. It means you've broken free from the collective illusions imprisoning humanity. But don't think of yourself as someone who's been cast out. Think of yourself as an undercover agent. Jung called this the ability of bilingual consciousness. At work, you speak the language of the majority to survive. You nod along with social conventions. But at home, you speak the language of truth. You're not being fake. You're carrying out a wise survival strategy called code switching. You move between two worlds without letting either one consume you. However, we need to pause here to establish an absolutely safe boundary. This is the most important warning in this protocol. The madness Jung spoke of is a metaphorical state of difference in perception, not a dysfunction of the brain. We must be extremely careful not to romanticize genuine mental illness under the label of awakening. Awakening brings clarity, sharp observation, and deep inner peace, even if outwardly it's seen as eccentricity. In contrast, mental illness brings confusion, fear, and loss of control. Never self-diagnose based on vague feelings. No one has the right to label your mind except trained doctors and professionals. Remember, the line between a sage and a psychiatric patient is sometimes as thin as a single strand of self-awareness. The awakened know they are walking that tightrope, keeping their balance with humility, while those suffering from illness slip and fall into the abyss of the unconscious. This fifth sign, therefore, is both an honorary medal for the courage to be different and a stern reminder to keep your feet firmly on the ground. If the fifth sign is a test of your endurance against the pressure of the crowd, then the sixth sign is the ultimate shield that helps you stand firm in the eye of the storm. Once you've accepted being seen by the world as mad, you unwittingly unlock a superpower that Jung saw as the pinnacle of personality maturity. Sign 6. Emotional autonomy. In the journey of psychological healing, we often hear a lot about personal boundaries. However, for those who are not yet awakened, boundaries are just faint lines drawn in the sand, easily washed away by the waves of emotion. But for those who have walked through the darkness, shadow work, boundaries become a solid fortress built from deep self-understanding. This state is what Jung called emotional autonomy. Imagine the mind of an ordinary person as a house with no doors. Anyone passing by, carrying mud, garbage, or storms, can walk right into the living room of their soul and create chaos. If their partner is sad, they immediately collapse. If a colleague is angry, they become anxious. They live in a state of toxic symbiosis, where their emotions are completely dependent on the weather of others' moods. But the awakened have installed a sturdy door for their house. The most subtle and profound sign of this transformation lies in a clear distinction between compassion and enmeshment. In popular culture, especially in societies that value emotional connection, we often make the dangerous mistake of thinking that loving someone means suffering together. If your loved one is sinking into despair, you feel obligated to jump into that pit with them to prove your love. The awakened see through the ignorance of this action. They understand that two people drowning cannot save each other. They practice a kind of love that is much more awake and difficult. When faced with another's pain, they do not turn away, but they also do not allow themselves to be swept into the spiral. An inner mantra always echoes in their mind. This is your pain. I see it. I honor it as part of your soul's journey. I will sit here beside you. but I refuse to carry it for you. They give others the dignity of being responsible for their own lives. They know that sometimes letting someone struggle is the only way for that person to grow. Excessive intervention, even in the name of love, is really just robbing someone of their chance to evolve. However, it is precisely this calm and steadfast attitude that becomes the reason why the awakened often face harsh accusations. Society, so accustomed to chains of emotional reaction, looks at your composure and labels you as cold, detached, or cruel. Don't be surprised if someone shouts at you, "How can you remain so calm when I'm suffering like this?" In reality, what they call coldness is nothing more than the failure of their manipulative tactics. In toxic relationships, manipulators often use heavy weapons like gaslighting or emotional blackmail. They use tears, anger, or silence to force you into submission. They want you to be afraid, to feel guilty, to be thrown off balance. The awakened, having worked deeply with themselves, recognize every corner of manipulation within their own psyche. Because of this, they can sense manipulation from others the moment it appears. Instead of responding with fear or angry resistance, they simply observe. They watch the emotional storm of the other person as a meteorologist watches a storm on a radar screen, understanding its mechanism but not getting wet. Their calmness is the full presence of both reason and compassion. This stability makes them the safest anchor in times of crisis. When the whole world panics, the awakened are the only ones who keep a cool head and find solutions. That coldness on the outside is, in truth, a protective layer for a warm heart within. A heart that knows how to love the right way, how to give without losing itself. Achieving emotional autonomy is like steering a great ship across the ocean. The waves outside may be fierce, passengers on board may scream, but you, the captain, hold the wheel steady, eyes fixed ahead, refusing to let any storm, no matter how large, divert your course. This is the ultimate freedom, which no external force can take from you. When the captain's hand is steady in the heart of the emotional storm, a greater question begins to arise. Where will this ship go? Does awakening mean we must forever sail away from the shore, leaving behind the world of humanity in search of solitude on a deserted island? Jung's answer is no. The journey of individuation is, in truth, a glorious but quiet homecoming. Sign 7. The Return of the Observer. In the myths that Jung painstakingly studied, after descending into the underworld and battling monsters, the hero is always given one final task: to bring back the elixir of immortality, to save the kingdom. For the awakened in the modern world, the kingdom is the bustling, everyday life, and the elixir is their new consciousness. This is the stage where the paradox of Jungian psychology reaches its peak. The awakened one returns and fully reintegrates into ordinary life, but their entire inner posture has changed. They move from the role of actor to the role of observer. Imagine life as a great dream. Before, while asleep, you were swept along by the events within that dream. If a monster chased you, you ran in fear. If someone praised you, you were ecstatic. You were a victim of the script, but with this sign, you become a lucid dreamer. You are still in the dream, still interacting with the other characters, but you are fully aware that it is a dream. This change brings a completely new quality of life. The awakened still get up at 7 a.m., still take their children to school, still answer work emails, and even participate in the petty arguments of daily life. Yet, they are no longer entangled or swallowed by the unconscious flow of these events. They work, but no longer sell their soul to the pressure of achievement. They love their family, but no longer manipulate or possess their loved ones. They participate in society, but do not let the waves of fear from the media or fleeting trends sweep away their inner peace. In the middle of a tense meeting where everyone is red-faced and arguing for their interests, The awakened person sits there, doing their part, but inside, their third eye calmly observes the entire psychological play unfolding. They see the fear behind a colleague's aggression, the insecurity behind a boss's boasting. It is precisely this seeing through ability that turns them into the vital individuals Jung called culture carriers. Their danger and their power lie in this silent presence. Imagine a room thrown into chaos by rumors of layoffs. Fear spreads like a virus, and everyone is panicking. Yet, in the corner of the room, there is one person calmly sipping coffee and working. This person says nothing, makes no effort to reassure anyone, but their calmness radiates such a powerful energy field that it begins to soothe those around them. They become the eye of the storm, the single point of stillness amid the gale. Their mere presence, effortlessly and naturally, creates cracks in the collective wall of the unconscious. When those around witness someone not reacting according to the common programming, not afraid when fear is expected, not greedy when greed is expected, not angry when provoked, a great question arises in the mind of the crowd. How can he be so calm? Is there another way to live besides the one we know? It is this very question that creates the opening for the light of awareness to enter. The awakened, simply by living fully from their true self, quietly plant the seeds of freedom in the minds of others. They prove that a person can rise above base instincts to live a nobler and more meaningful life. With this sign, the solid wall dividing the inner world of the mind from the outer world of matter, the boundary we've long believed to be absolute, begins to turn transparent and fade. This is when the awakened enter the most mysterious territory of Jungian psychology. Sign 8. The emergence of synchronicity. In the rational mindset of the West, as well as in American society, we are programmed to believe in the law of cause and effect absolutely. Everything must have a clear physical cause. Anything outside this law is usually dismissed as superstition, random coincidence, or mere luck. But Carl Jung, as a scientist and physician, challenged this bias with the concept of synchronicity. He defined it as meaningful coincidences, where an inner psychological event, a dream, thought, or intuition, and an external physical event happen at the same time without any ordinary causal connection, yet carry profound meaning for the person experiencing it. When the process of individuation reaches maturity, the boundary between the unconscious and the conscious becomes thin. When your inner world reaches wholeness, the external world begins to reflect that wholeness. In reality, this phenomenon often starts with moments so uncanny they make you shiver in awe. Recall those times when you suddenly think of an old friend you haven't spoken to in decades. A nameless urge rises up, and soon after, your phone rings and their name appears on the screen. Most people brush it off, saying, "It's just a coincidence." But the awakened, with the sensitivity of the observer, recognize that the probability of such events happening by pure chance is almost zero. They know this is an unspoken conversation. The universe, or the collective unconscious, begins to join your dialogue. Understand that mind and matter are not as separate as we believe. Jung saw them as two sides of the same coin. When the gravitational field of your mind changes, when you become whole, the material world around you must rearrange itself to match. That coincidence is not a miracle. It is the quantum physics of the soul. The appearance of synchronicity is evidence that you are on the right path. It is the signal that your inner rhythm is resonating perfectly with the rhythm of the universe. The impact of this experience on the modern psyche is profound and deeply healing. Industrial society has severed the sacred bond between humans and nature, turning us into lonely biological machines, adrift and aimless in a cold, indifferent universe. We often feel small, meaningless, like random specks of dust colliding with one another. But when synchronicity appears, that existential loneliness dissolves. You begin to feel directly, not through books or theory, that you are an organic part of a greater flow of meaning. There is a hidden order operating beneath the chaos of life, and you are connected to that order. Matter and mind are no longer strangers to each other, but two sides of the same coin. Jung called this state unus mundus, one world. You do not need to search for or chase after these coincidences. Such actions only come from the controlling ego. You need only remain awake and observant. When you stop forcing your will on the river of life and begin to go with the flow, the signs will naturally appear. They come to remind you, you are not alone. Every thought, every vibration within you is interacting with the vast web of life. And when you change your inner frequency, the outer reality has no choice but to change accordingly. That is the true power of synchronicity, when these signals from the universe confirm your connection to the greater whole. The journey of individuation brings you to the final, most difficult task, healing the split within your own being. This is when you reach the pinnacle of wholeness, where all inner conflicts are resolved. Sign 9. The balance of the inner masculine and feminine. For centuries, society has shaped us according to rigid gender molds. Men are taught to deny their softness, to become dry, logical machines. Women are taught to be gentle, dependent, and to live by their emotions. But Jung, with the piercing insight of a prophet, saw that the human soul is fundamentally androgynous. He called the hidden feminine within a man the anima, and the hidden masculine within a woman the animus. True awakening is not about becoming an alpha male or a traditional woman by society standards. Awakening is the process of fully integrating the dormant opposite gender within oneself. No matter whether you are male or female, awakening demands balance. The masculine dominant person learns to accept the softness, nurturing, and artistry of the anima. The feminine dominant person finds the sword of reason and the sharp decisiveness of the animus. Wholeness is when the warrior and the mother coexist peacefully within one body. The impact of this androgynous balance brings a seismic shift in how the awakened view love and relationships. We grow up with the myth of the lost half, soulmate. The idea that we are born as incomplete fragments and must find someone outside ourselves to become whole. The awakened shatter this romantic but risky illusion. They no longer look for someone to fill the void within, because they have already filled it themselves. Existential loneliness disappears, replaced by absolute freedom. When a person reaches this state of balance, they enter relationships not out of need, but out of want. Two whole people walk side by side, like two planets with their own orbits sharing the same sky. Not two cripples leaning on each other just to move forward. This is the hieros gamos that the ancient alchemists longed for, the union of sun and moon within a single being. It is the pinnacle of autonomy, the final portrait of a truly awakened human being. We have traveled together through a long and thorny journey. Summing up these 9 signs, we see that the process Jung called individuation is, in truth, a kind of psychological crucifixion. To touch wholeness, you must accept the death of your old self, the obedient, compliant, and easily manipulated version that society has carefully molded. So if you see yourself in these signs, solitude, exhaustion from social performances, or the feeling of being labeled an outsider, please don't be afraid. You are simply evolving. This world doesn't need more good people who are skilled actors. The world needs whole human beings who dare to live honestly with both their light and their shadow. If you're ready to accept the glorious cost of awakening, affirm your place by commenting below. I am awake. Don't try to explain your transformation to those who are still asleep. Let your transformation speak for itself. If this video has reached the deepest part of you, please like and share it to spread the light of awareness. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because the healing journey back to your whole self is still a long one. I will continue to walk alongside you in the next videos.